So, Matt, tell me about the time your dad gave you an emerald mine.
Yeah, I don't like to talk about it really. I mean, it was only a small emerald mine. In fact, it's so small I barely even remember it.
Yeah, exactly.
My dad drove trucks and then was the transport manager of a waste paper factory.
Did you get much free paper?
He got a lot of chucked away porno mags, actually.
So this was very formative for you then.
I didn't realize this was a therapy session.
So Matt, how did your dad's porno mags affect you mentally?
Oh, you have to ask me that when we're not recording on the podcast.
Yeah,
no, seriously, it was really like he occasionally used to go to his factory and like literally be walking around, and you would literally be knee deep in like 1980s porno mags that had been chucked away. They were like pulped up. He was like, "Don't look down, don't look down." I got a cool Sex Pistols poster actually, like off the floor of his waste paper factory.
Mm-hmm. Just think, all those porno mags were turned into leaflets for Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, there's probably quite a lot of them in there as well.
But like, weirdly enough, we're living through the oncoming reappraisal of glamour models in the 2000s, which
I thought you were about to say we're living through the ongoing reappraisal of Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, well, we're definitely living through that. A lot of people who love Margaret Thatcher don't want to admit it, and I hope they all burn. With your new knee-high leather boot collection, you're bringing that 80s back. A lot of those boys had things for Thatcher, man. I'm bringing back, the Rob Halford look.
Yeah, exactly. Who knew he was gay?
Yeah, don't look at any of the lyrics of any Judas Priest song. But yeah, you're very welcome to Beneath the Skin. No, we're not talking about 80s porno mags or
beneath the motorcycle boots. Little bit of ankle on display today.
We are the show about the history of everything told through the history of tattooing. Matt is just like laughing into his hands. I am one of your hosts, Thomas O'Mahony, and I'm joined by my esteemed co-host, Dr. Matt Lauder. We have a couple of announcements up front on this show. It's our 1 year anniversary. It was last week, but we forgot to, because I was busy and Matt had to record on his own. And
thank you, by the way, for fixing the audio, that I recorded half of that on the wrong microphone.
Yeah, midway through, because like I texted Matt, I was like, "When are you recording?" And he was like, "Soon." This is at like 9:30 at night. And then I get a text at 10:30. It was like, "Fuck, I'm after recording half of it through my headphones."
It was my webcam, actually. It wasn't quite as bad as my headphones. It was my webcam mic. But you'll notice, if you listen to that episode, which is on the Patreon feed, if you listen to that episode, you'll notice halfway through the audio quality markedly improving.
Yeah. We also have an announcement up top. Finn Guthrie, a fantastic tattoo artist in the UK, had his machine stolen recently. They got stolen the other day, so there's a fundraiser going on to help raise money to get him back on his feet, get him back working. So the link for that will be down in the description. Even if you can only afford a couple of quid, every little helps, as Tesco says. And this is an unfortunate thing that happens too often. So if it happens to you, let us know and we can see if we can help out.
And you were telling me just now, you've heard about a spate of people stealing tattoos, like running off without paying.
Yeah, I was getting tattooed on Friday, and my artist, shout out to Sammy Hellroyd, was telling me about someone who stole a tattoo off him and like went and said, "Oh, I need to run out and get cash," and like left a phone. That was just a burner phone that he obviously bought in a shop and just never came back. I don't understand how you can steal a tattoo and then like
bad karma.
And how you can go back and get another tattoo, because it's it's a small industry. Everyone kind of knows each other.
That is bad karma, man. That is real bad karma.
That is very bad karma.
I was also down in Wales this weekend. So, or Thursday, Friday,
Wales?
I went down Wales. I went to see the Jesse Nate collection, and if anyone's interested, you can go back and listen to our episodes on that. But the digitization of that stuff and the conservation is coming on apace, which is really exciting. So keep your eyes peeled. Well, listen to the show. We'll announce when it's all up. And we're talking about a series of projects and ideas for the coming year and years ahead, putting some stuff on display, maybe doing some open days down there, so people can come and see the collection. It's amazing. I mean, Lisa, who's the curator there, who we interview on a special episode of the podcast as well, is really doing some amazing conservation work on the Flash. Really, really funny story, Tom. So they've started doing kind of spectrographic analysis, chemical analysis on these Flash sheets to try and figure out what they can about how they're put together. And there's a series of sheets that are quite mysterious, actually, but they're from Australia in the 50s. We don't quite know who the artist is yet. We've been chatting to Brett Stewart at the Australian Tattoo Museum to see if we can figure out that. But Lisa's been scanning these, and they've been doing kind of various bits of chemical analysis. And basically, the results are, we have no fucking idea what this is.
Listen back to our episode with Lisa where we talked about the conservation of items like this.
Because they're comparing the composition of these Flash sheets, right, from the 50s, 60s, with reference samples from things like the V&A. So clearly, like, nothing really matches, because these tattooers, and we're going to be talking about a mid-century tattooer or sort of second half of the 20th century tattooer today in our episode, but the materials were just so random and so kind of commercial and strange, and like don't really reflect anything that material science recognizes at the moment. And she's having a lot of fun, like figuring out what all this stuff is, like even what it's made of, how to look after it. Why? Here's a mystery. Why, after 60 years, is it still sticky? No.
Sticky back plastic. Telling you.
Sticky back plastic that probably wasn't sticky when it started and is now.
Well, that's because the degradation of plastics, when, all that is solid melts into air, all that is plastic melts into oil.
So, like they're having a lot of fun down there with that collection. And every time I go down, I see more stuff as well. And we're learning more about it all the time, both with the work that Lisa is doing, but also all the amazing eyes of, I mentioned on the episode last week, people like Terry Manton, these historians in the community that are doing all this work and joining a lot of these dots up. So, yeah, that was super inspiring, and I had a lot of fun in Cardiff last week.
And one more announcement before we get into the meat and potatoes, or I suppose Nutri-Loaf and potatoes for Matt. If you are at the London Tattoo Expo next week, look for Matt. What booth number are you?
I don't know. I've got a table. I'll be selling books and some podcast shirts on Saturday and Sunday at the big tattoo show run by the crew that run Total Tattoo magazine. Since the London Tattoo Convention that was run by Mickey Valletto no longer is running, this is now the biggest kind of show in London, so it's going to be a really good show. I'm going to be up there selling books. I'm taking as many books as I can carry. So if anyone wants to come and get a signed copy,
that's why you've been going rock climbing. You're training your back, for carrying all the books.
Hell yeah.
Matt is built like a spider monkey, in case anyone doesn't know.
It should be a really good show. Some of the tattooers who are friends of the show are going to be there. Darren Quinn, who's been tattooing my partner Layla, is going to be there with their shop Leather Lane Tattoo, and there'll be loads of other people there as well. It's going to be good. Out in London Docklands at the XL Centre.
Cool. So with that out of the way, we are talking about a name that is maybe a little bit lesser known to some people, but is such a incredible artist, super influential, and a really cool story as well. Yeah. And today, if from the title, you could probably guess we're talking about Pinky Yoon.
Oh yeah, people have clicked on the title and know what this is all about. We can't keep the spoiler. So I want to start this episode, Tom, with a quote from Ed Hardy's autobiography, the My Life in Tattoos autobiography, because again, it's a theme we return to a lot on this show, which is Sailor Jerry's racism.
Not laughing about racism. I'm laughing about how people got mad at me in one of our first episodes when I said Sailor Jerry was a bigot. And time again, I am proved right.
Well, so, okay. This is what Ed says. This is like in the early 70s, I think. We drove over to meet Pinky Yoon, the great Hong Kong tattooist who had opened a shop in Alameda, a small island on the other side of the Bay Bridge next to a huge naval base. In the back of my mind, I carried a whisper of Jerry's great fear that if the Orientals ever got into the trade, we'd all be finished. Jerry felt we couldn't match their entrepreneurial skills, work ethic, aesthetic reach, or vision. So, like, it's racist, but in a positive way.
Oh.
The other thing, this is also, I read about this when I was preparing for this episode too. Apparently, so Jerry, I mean, we've talked about this in passing on the show a few times. Jerry clearly was a conservative and difficult man with some opinions of the time. But he did, he was clearly very enamored with Japanese tattooing and was friendly and friends with and connected with tattooers in Japan, and is really responsible in lots of ways. We'll talk more about that as we come through today, because this is part of the same story. Is responsible for this kind of one of the people responsible for this resurgence of connecting Oriental and Western tattooing. I mean, Ed and Sam Stewart, Phil Sparrow, is also part of that story too. But I did read that when Jerry invited tattooers from Japan to come to Hawaii, the first thing he did, like before he took them like home or to the hotel, like from the airport, he'd drive them to the Pearl Harbor Memorial. Did you know that story? Did you know that story?
No, I didn't.
Like literally the first thing he made Japanese visitors to Hawaii see was the Pearl Harbor Museum.
I'm not surprised.
No, I'm not surprised either. No. Like, look, again, it's more complicated, but yeah, you can understand what I mean. My grandfather was like this. I think I said this on the show before. If you've been attacked by, in that climate as well, when my grandfather was like shot at by Japanese submarines, didn't like the Japanese. I mean, it's not the Japanese people's fault necessarily, but like Jerry had obviously lived through Pearl Harbor and like in Hawaii, and had also seen all the propaganda against Oriental people from the Korean War and the Vietnam War afterwards as well. So like, it's horrible, it's racist, but like, he weren't the only guy that was racist against Oriental people, particularly Japanese people in the 1960s and 70s. But good on Ed Hardy. And we've talked about this before, but good on Ed Hardy for like calling him out on that as much as he did. That's I love that. Yeah. So Jerry was worried. Apparently, at if he got wind of the fact that Pinky was getting too friendly with Ed, we'd all be finished. And then, so Ed goes on. Pinky was one of the most famous people throughout the tattoo world. He ruled over an empire at his shop above the Neptune bar in Wan Chai, the sailor town of Hong Kong. He always wanted to come to the States and made the move when he discovered there was no tattoo shops in Alameda. He greeted me like an old friend. He knew my work and admired it extravagantly. He couldn't have been more friendly and welcoming. At Pinky's shop that day as well, I met Chuck Eldridge, who would become one of the great tattoo historians. So he runs Chuck runs the tattoo archive. He just got out of the Navy and was already prepared with tattoos. So this is like a shop in Hong Kong that Pinky had been running like basically since the 50s. Like he left China. He was born in China in 1927. And like China and the Chinese seaports, like the rest of the world, was very busy during that period. But the communist revolution happened, and they took over China. They weren't particularly
Fond of tattoos.
Fond of tattooing, yeah. And so he left and moved to Hong Kong in 1949, and then he ran shops in Hong Kong, in Kowloon, in Macau, in Taiwan, all these kind of Chinese colonies, and tattooed in Japan during the Korean War. And as Ed says there, he came to America in the early 1970s, and then moved in 1980, and became this absolutely kind of, again, like linchpin basically of the California tattoo scene. The California tattoo scene, which when I was getting into tattooing in the early 90s, starting to sort of read copies of Tattoo Time, reading an interview with Pinky Young that's in Tattoo Time number 3, which also has an interview with Lal Hardy in it, I think. Yep, same one. That California scene with Ed and the history there with Burt Grimm and all of those histories going back on the Pike and everything. Like, California just felt like such a kind of mecca of tattooing for me. It's like what sort of cemented tattooing and what tattooing was in my mind. And like, Pinky's right at the center of that, and is in many ways, again, as we'll talk about, like, responsible for creating what tattooing there looks like. He's this incredible artist who retired in 2009. So he was tattooing from about the age of 16. So what's that, like, in the 30s, like 1943?
Yeah, it's early 40s.
Something like that, early 40s. So he was working there for like basically 60, had tattooing for 60 years. Incredible guy. And apparently there's actually a book that Ed released. I haven't actually got it, irritatingly, but there was a book, if anyone's listening to this and wants to learn more about Pinky, there's a book of his flash with little testimonies in it from other people around the California scene, people like Leo Zulueta and stuff. Clearly well liked, and just even just from that short snippet of Ed's book there that I read, a super nice guy.
And also it's super interesting because he comes from a very distinct kind of artistic lineage, obviously, being in China throughout the 40s and 50s and 60s, and seeing the evolution of tattooing at that stage. And you, even in that interview with Ed in Tattoo Time, when talking about the differences in the art, Ed points out that Pinky's using a 3-liner rather than a 5, so the lines are finer, there's much more detail in them. And even he contrasts it with the difference between Japanese tattooing and what was emerging as the Chinese tattoo style as well. Obviously there's a lot of crossover and influence in the design aesthetic of Chinese and Japanese art as a whole, but if you look up a lot of Pinky's much more Chinese designs, you can really see it stands out among a lot of the Japanese stuff, especially that was going on in California when he moved.
Right, and he talks in that interview. I mean, we should maybe just, that's a good kind of segue to this. Like, in this interview, he does talk about almost moving towards that style, right? Making his start tattooing Americans largely out of those ports, right? Like, places like Hong Kong had been, central kind of, nexuses for international tattoo styles, since the middle of the 19th century, right? Since Japan made tattooing illegal and made lots of Japanese tattooers move to Hong Kong. And of course, Hong Kong, huge naval base, hugely strategically important, big multicultural, meeting point. So it had been this kind of, pretty important nexus point for tattooing. And he talks about starting tattooing in the American style. So Ed says Pinky, so his real name, by the way, is Bing Quan Yun. Ed says, Pinky, you started tattooing in Shanghai, right? And he says, yes, I started there when I was a small boy. I learned from a Shanghainese. They're famous in China for craftsmanship in many things, tailoring, making shoes. And they were tattooing in Shanghai for a long time. Were their customers in those days Chinese or sailors? And Pinky says they were sailors, both merchant seamen and servicemen. What kind of designs did they get? In the old days, they got anchors, flags, hearts, traditional sailor style. After the communists took over, I moved to Hong Kong. And then he says, we were tattooing by hand, not the Japanese hand style, working tool over thumb on the left hand. They just held it in the right hand and picked the tattoo in that way. So again, Western sailor style pricking tattooing. And starting with that, perhaps surprisingly, right, this kind of more American or more, not even American, like kind of traditional sailor style. But then he was able, after he left China, the mainland at least, and moved to Hong Kong, like was able to start incorporating these more Oriental designs.
And it's super interesting as well, the way he talks about, you know, that there wasn't really any shops either at this time. A lot of it was, you know, tattoo artists traveling around, and he mentions particularly, you know, like coolies and rickshaw men being tattooed, and they'd just be standing on the side of the road waiting for customers, and a tattoo artist would go up and say, "Do you want a tattoo?" And
yeah, because these guys are coming off shore leave, you know, they're hanging around the bars, they're hanging around the sex shops kind of thing. I mean, it's interesting to me. I've been looking as part of the research for the new book. I've been looking at a lot of like service newspapers from World War II. So those newspapers that were sort of, you know, news from the regiments, news from various places where battalions were stationed and stuff. And obviously a lot of these guys are writing letters, and a lot of the articles are about getting tattoos. And it's really interesting that at this time, and I think my kind of working theory is this affects a lot of what happens afterwards in terms of how tattooing's thought about, is tattooing becomes really re-exoticized during World War II. So as we've talked about in the podcast a lot, like in the early part of the 20th century, tattooing is it's not that exotic. Like it's kind of odd, like it's eccentric, but it's not necessarily by the 1930s is not thought about as something particularly foreign. However, of course, what World War II does is it all of a sudden starts putting young men in India, in Burma, in Hong Kong, and all of a sudden tattooing is part of the exotic like sense of what's happening. And so tattooing becomes foreign again, becomes strange again in a way that it hadn't really been in the 1920s and 30s. It was really interesting to notice that as I was looking at the research. And I think this is a perfect example. And you can see how, even the way Pinky's describing it in this post-war period, like tattooing, he starts to cater in a way to these service people who want more things that feel a bit more oriental, feel a bit more kind of the place, even if it's slightly confected, right?
Yeah, and it's the transition of exoticism from oddity to experience that, like, rather than it being a curiosity of an unknown world, it is, you know, a curiosity of like being in somewhere that is so culturally different and even like physically different from where you're from, that it's kind of that overwhelming experience of like seeing something completely out of your imagination, and it's like, this is what exotic is.
Yeah, and of course, like the culture there, not just in tattooing, but adapts, and that we saw this happening in the earlier generation of Japanese tattooing as well, adapts to cater to a market that wants that, right? So again, like in this interview, Pinky says, so he was in Japan during the Korean War, in Macau, and then he says, Ed says, when you return to Hong Kong from Japan, were there many tattoo shops? He says, no, not many, only one or two or three. Ed says, in the 1950s, there were only a few tattooers anywhere, even in the big cities in the West. What kind of designs were originated in Hong Kong were popular then? And he says, well, after the movie Susie Wong came out, we did a lot of designs of Susie Wong, that type of girl on Cheong Sam. The movie was made here in Wan Chai with William Holden. The editor's note, the Cheong Sam is the tight-fitting traditional Chinese dress. And Ed says, Hong Kong style tattooing since about 1960 has been characterized by finer lines and more detail than Western work, 3 needles instead of 5. Was that always typical of Chinese tattooing in Hong Kong and Shanghai? And Pinky says, no. Before, I used a heavier line, but we gradually changed to a thinner line. Now people like that look more, and it makes it easier to see more detail. So you can see, like, both in the, you know, there's this kind of music, this film, this Hollywood production of exoticizing the Far East. It's a whole thing that's happening in popular culture right into the 70s too. And you've got the tattooing there changing from that more American-looking stuff with the thicker lines into something that feels different, exotic, and strange, right?
Mm-hmm. Hey, are you enjoying the show? If you really like Beneath the Skin and you want to help support us, you can do so on Patreon. For little as £5 a month, you can help make this show possible, help us buy research materials. So if you like the show and you want to support us, consider kicking us a few quid a month. And you'll get everything from bonus episodes to Q&As, and you can even vote on what tattoo I'll get when we reach a certain subscriber count. Matt, have you got anything to say?
You should really definitely fund the Patreon, because tattoo history is massive, right? Deep, wide, complicated. We're covering some big hit topics on the main feed, but on the Patreon subscriber-only feed, we'll be getting into some really more interesting, niche, deep topics you don't want to miss out on. And honestly, the chance to kind of decide what Thomas gets on his body is probably just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Subscribe, chuck us a few quid. Don't miss out on this chance to ruin Thomas's body forever.
Everyone knows that tattoo aftercare is one of the most important steps in getting a new tattoo. We all want our fresh new tattoos to heal as easily and hassle-free as possible so we can show them off to the world.
That's why Sanoderm's here to help. Driven by science and innovation, Sanoderm products have been thoroughly tested and used by doctors and tattoo artists alike for over 10 years.
Sanoderm brings cutting-edge technology to make your tattoo healing process a breeze. No more messing around with cleaning and plastic every few hours with Sanoderm's amazing range of aftercare products. I personally have used Sanoderm to heal my tattoos in the past, and they made what used to be a daily process of setting reminders on my phone to clean and rewrap my tattoo into a one-step process.
Their medical-grade products include aftercare balms, soaps, and my favourite, their second skin aftercare bandages. Sanoderm's tattoo bandages are designed to be waterproof, breathable, and keep your new tattoo protected from whatever the elements can throw at it, so you can get on with your day, worry-free, and confident your new tattoo will look vibrant and will heal faster.
Plus, their products are all natural and ethically sourced, so you can take comfort in knowing that you're healing your tattoos with nature's finest ingredients.
So next time you're in an artist's chair, why not try Sanoderm, healing your tattoos the modern way so you can get on with your day.
Check out the link in the description of this episode for discounts on a range of Sanoderm products or for more information. And it also has the continuity with, you know, what we talked about on the episode on the Patreon about the history of pinups, is that like the visual language of, you know, people getting like erotic stuff like, you know, a sexy lady or whatever is influenced by contemporary culture at the time, whether it's hyper localized, like, you know, models and film stars in the US, or it's, you know, movies that are being made by Hollywood but made in Hong Kong and Shanghai, of, you know, in Hong Kong. You know, people are in Hong Kong, they want a tattoo of Susie Wong.
Exactly.
If they're in, you know, the US, they might be wanting one of Greta Garbo. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, I mean, again, as I mentioned on our Patreon episode that I recorded in the 1890s, you know, even like tattooers then were saying, why not get a portrait of a popular film star? Not a popular film star, popular celebrity kind of thing. So, okay, so Pinky like becomes, you know, because he's this kind of, he's this pivotal guy, and again, Ed describes him as running a blood and thunder tattoo shop above the Neptune bar in the Sailortown district. He became a correspondent of American tattooers who came through, particularly of Sailor Jerry. So again, as Ed describes, many of the pin-up designs in Jerry's shop came from Pinky Yun. And like, this is perhaps, you know, the next thing we should talk about, because so much of those designs that we really think of when we think of Sailor Jerry, obviously he's adapting them, but they're coming from other places. They're coming from Brooklyn J. Lieber, they're coming from Tats Thomas, but like Pinky, and particularly these like Orientalist designs, particularly the way he's drawing dragons, they particularly like a lot of the large back piece designs that he's doing, which is obviously a kind of reimagination of the traditional Japanese style back piece, that's coming through Pinky. And you can see, you know, as I said, this book of The Flash that Ed had has been published, and there are a few books that people have put out of things that they'd got from Pinky. And Lionel Titchener, who runs the Oxford, who ran the Oxford Tattoo Museum, a big important figure in the history of British tattooing, president of the British Tattoo Association for a long time. He put out, or there was a book put out of sheets that he'd got from Pinky. So he becomes this kind of nexus point really in the 70s, like when he's moved to the United States in particular, of like that moment that in the traditional academic,
he's bringing the East West.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly kind of pushing it forward another step. I mean, we talked about this when we talked with Julia about our episode about tattooing in Spain. This period in the 70s gets called in the academic literature the tattoo renaissance, and I think, for reasons I've discussed at length, that's not really a useful description most of the time. In fact, there was a use of that term in England in the 50s. But like the reason that moment in the 70s gets called the Renaissance is because of this kind of thing, because of Ed being in San Francisco, being in California, and like bringing all of these things together. And Pinky's a big part of that Renaissance, right? Because again, it is a development of styles, a real merger, because European and Japanese tattooers have been doing combination designs for 100 years by this point, more or less. But what you start to see in the work of Sailor Jerry and the work that's inspired by Pinky is this kind of American graphic style, the thicker line stuff.
Yeah.
Combined with the Oriental design language, and the clash of these, like, for example, pin-ups with the. I mean, again, that's a trope that is, again, much older than this, but it comes into a new kind of stylistic language in this period. And Pinky is like credited basically by pretty much everyone who was there at the time for being a complete nexus point for this stuff,
Mm-hmm. And there's a really interesting part in the interview in Tattoo Time as well, when he's talking about, after, the Vietnam War ended, and there wasn't, as many sailors around, there wasn't as many servicemen getting tattooed, that there was like a lot of young Chinese guys getting tattooed, being re-influenced by watching, Chinese kung fu movies, and like a lot of the actors having tattoos in those movies. A lot of them probably done by Pinky or his contemporaries at the time. And it's coming full circle of, you have, in the 50s and 60s, you have, stuff that's coming from Pinky via Jerry and others getting tattooed on people in the US, and now it's coming full circle that he's tattooing, Chinese immigrants in the US with this stuff he designed 20 years ago.
Yeah, and like I think it's no coincidence that the publisher of the Pinky Young book is Taki Kitamura, right, who runs State of Grace. They published a book of Horiyoshi's work, for example, of Hori Chiyo's work, but Taki published the Pinky Young thing, and there's an interesting interview with him from last year when the book came out. So that literally in the same town in San Diego. He says, everyone I knew had tattoos from him. Maybe the first 5 years of my career was a lot of either finishing Pinky tattoos, tattooing next to existing Pinky tattoos, or putting a background around a Pinky tattoo. Right. And so like he's this, I mean, again, as you said at the beginning, like maybe people don't know him, like 2003, a magazine in San Jose, the Wave magazine, called him, quote, the most famous Bay Area tattoo artist you've never heard of. But yeah, I think with the work of people like Taki, that's changing. There's a really nice. So this really made me happy. This is a description I found, a nice sort of blog post by someone on a forum who was tattooed by Pinky in 1988. Someone called Gia Dobson. So Gia Dobson posted this on a forum back in 2010. I turned 18 in 1988 and got 6 tattoos that year. Somehow by fate, I ended up at Pinky Young's Dragon Tattoo in San Jose for all but one of my tattoos. I wish I knew how I ended up there, but memory fails me. One of these missions, I decided I wanted a dragon on my lower leg. I loved the flow of them and the organic nature of the design. Also, I did have a tiny grain of sense with regard to the human body as a canvas. I knew it was curved, not flat like paper. Therefore, a tattoo design should complement the part of the body. So I tell Pinky I want a dragon on my calf. By this time, he's tattooed a couple of times, and for some reason, he'd taken a bit of a shine to me. Honestly, I think he liked me because I wasn't a pain like 90% of the customers I saw in there. I was quiet and respectful, never drunk or pushy. I sat politely and waited my turn. I listened when he talked, doing my very best to understand his horrible English, laughed at his corny jokes, and pretty much let him do his thing. He asked me how big and makes a gesture like about 4 or 5 inches. I tell him bigger and he laughs. Okay, bigger. You want bigger. We agreed it'll be the entire calf, so I sit in the chair. He then does something I've never seen before or since. He takes a toothpick, dips it in black ink, and draws a single curvy line on my leg. Next, he draws 4 little curved lines, which I could tell would be the legs. Then he picks up a machine. What happened next was totally mind-boggling. He busts out that dragon completely freehand in 45 minutes.
Oh my God.
I was in awe the entire time. If you know Pinky, I've ever seen a picture of him and you know his eyes are terrible. By the time I was getting tattooed by him, he was already an old man. His glasses were as thick as Coke bottles, but he could have done that tattoo blindfolded. I knew he'd simply done so many dragons in his lifetime. It was as natural as walking or breathing or any other activity one does without thought. And actually, I'll send you a link to this so you can see the picture. They posted a picture of it when it was new, and a picture of it then in 2010. And like you can see, put this in the chat. You can see like how well this amazing thing held up from the 80s. There's a whole long post. I won't read the whole thing, but there's another funny little story here that I really like. So he says, one evening I was at Dragon with a friend who was getting a Japanese warrior on his calf. The design had some nighttime sky in it. When it came to colour, they agreed to do a blue moon colour, at which point Pinky started singing the 50s song Blue Moon. Of course, with his accent, it was more like Brew Moon. It was the only line of the song he knew, so for the rest of the tattoo, every 10 minutes or so, he'd burst out another Brew Moon and then hum a little bit, and we'd all laugh. When I see that friend today, we still sing at each other with that accent. So there we go.
That tattoo is incredible.
Isn't that great?
Like, even 22 years later, it's still like tough as nails.
Beautiful, hey? Like still held up.
And I'm currently looking on my screen at a great article from earlier this year where a friend of the show, Doug Hardy, provided some scans from Ed's collection. And at the bottom, there's a lovely picture of a young Doug and his dad with Pinky.
Shout out to Doug.
Yeah, Doug's wearing a great Judge Dredd t-shirt.
Amazing. I mean, it's really clear that Ed, hails Pinky's influence on, not just on Jerry, because Jerry then became an influence to everybody else, right? So this is, again, what Taki says in this interview, right? Like, what he calls the raw power of Yun's style of tattooing. Like, all these amazing designs. And then he says Taki says, as much as Pinky's dragons are legendary, he was also really the tiger guy. Kitamura himself sports a crawling tiger from Yun on his shin. Again, he simply dipped a toothpick in ink, placed 5 dots in a line, and started tattooing with no stencil. It's a simple design that Kitamura writes in the book has become a staple in tattoo culture and one he wears proudly. And he was also ambidextrous, so he tattooed with both hands. Not only did he tattoo freehand, he was ambidextrous. Kitamura shares a tale in the book of Yun walking into a room full of other tattoo artists unfamiliar with his work. He placed a long sheet of paper on the wall, equipped with both hands with a pen, and began to draw 2 dragons simultaneously.
Yeah, like it's in that interview he did with Ed in Tattoo Time. He says, he uses the right hand, he uses his left hand sometimes, but he got used to using the right hand to tattoo, so he uses his left hand to draw.
Yeah. There's actually, in Ed's book, there's a story about that with Doug. In September 1984, I went over with Doug, who was about to turn 18. We went from San Francisco to Hong Kong, accepted an invitation from Pinky to visit him in Hong Kong, where he still owned property. We became great friends after he moved to Alameda, and he made periodic trips back to China. Pinky and Sailor Jerry shared tons of designs and information about machines, etc. Most of Jerry's signature pin-ups from the beginning of the 60s were slightly transformed Pinky originals. It was a real treat to have Pinky as our host. His shop was one of the most famous among natives from every continent. World full of Susie Wong, lots of sailors, hookers, bars, separating seamen from their cash. We did a whirlwind trip to Macau, the Portuguese colony famous for its gambling. We raised a stink on the bus when the driver suggested that since time was getting short, we'd skip the Taoist temples with these murals that Doug and I wanted to see. Other tourists weren't that interested in the murals of Taoist immortals. The driver grudgingly took us to the temple. Well done, Doug. You were raised right. I met with our printer in Hong Kong, who Francesca, who's Ed's wife, had gotten a lead to, and we'd used it in the second issue of Tattoo Time. They did a great work. I was interviewing Pinky for an article, and we took photographs of his shop. Doug was excited to be living in Japan, as he grew up with the same sensibility as I did. So Pinky's also this kind of pivotal moment for after going to Hong Kong, they went straight to Japan, and it's even then, even when he's not even living there anymore, his tattoo shop is still a stopover point between America and Japan for the tattoo pilgrim. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, it's incredible, and it's it's so interesting when you look at even his most simplest designs, so influential. And it's we talk about it a lot with artists who did a lot of Flash, sold a lot of Flash, how over time their stuff gets transformed and is referenced and referenced and referenced to the point where a lot of people don't know who did the original. Even if you look at the flying dragon design that Pinky did, that's everywhere. In every shop you go into that has at least one trad artist, you're gonna see it.
Yeah, and of course, again, they're reworkings of designs that go back into the 19th century. But what I think Pinky's bringing is this kind of confidence. Clearly, he understood. It's interesting actually, because he clearly understands graphically that Oriental art, the Chinese and Japanese art. But he is also, particularly because he's really spent so much time in Hong Kong, which is this hybrid place, this kind of liminal space of cultural contact. He's living that moment, in a really particular way, and understands clearly what his customers want. I think I don't know. I was interested, what was it about? Because when we were talking about what we're going to do today as an episode, you immediately said, let's talk about Pinky. What was it that drew you to it for the first time?
Well, I what really drew me to him first was obviously the designs, because they're incredible, they're sick, but also it's for me, I really enjoy tracing the kind of visual lineage of a lot of designs that you see today and are quite contemporary. And I remember a good while ago looking at a lot of Pinky stuff and just noticing small things. Was oh, I was in a shop last week and saw that wing from this Pinky design on a completely different tattoo. but also I think it's his story is one that people don't really talk about. I hear tattoo artists talk about him, but I think he's someone that most people who are into tattoos probably don't know about. And I think being that nexus point between both East and West, but also that nexus point between the tattooing in the 50s that was happening in the US, and then the tattooing in the 70s in the US, him alongside Ed and others, it seems like the missing link, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. What's the other thing that struck me about him, speaking about him being a missing link in a way, or this, of course, when you look him up in the newspaper archives, he's also a constant refrain in the tattoos used to just be for sailors, and now they're trendy. Yeah. Storytelling, because again, he has this perfect history of tattooing in the war, tattooing in a naval base, and then being in trendy California. So he's like, I found 2 articles about him 10 years apart, one in 1991 and one in 2001, and both of them are like, you'll never guess how trendy tattooing is now. 1991, in the San Jose Republic. San Jose. He was born Bing Wan Yun, but you can call him Pinky. Take a seat in his San Jose storefront and he'll hurt you. He'll cut you. He'll make you bleed. He'll scar you for life. And when he's done, you'll pay him top dollar and say thank you. For you will have joined a fraternity that binds share to Egyptian mummies and prehistoric hunter-gatherers to the guy with a chopper in his driveway, a group riding a resurgence of celebrity-driven popularity. You will have a tattoo. I wish I'd seen this article when I was writing Painted People, because that would have been a great introduction to the book.
Painted People too.
Movie stars, they have a tattoo. In Hong Kong, you have Kung Fu movie actors with tattoos. You have a lot of people from the MTV music shows. They have tattoos. There's one, a tattoo artist since 18, who'd opened his West San Carlos street shop in 1987. You've got all kinds of customers now. It used to be how you say from middle class on down, but now you see all kinds of people, doctors, everything. Tattoos are hip, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Pinky there, fashionable tattooing. They also mentioned Roy Boy, who Sean Porter mentioned when he was on. And then in 2001, so a decade later, this is in the Reno Gazette, where they're talking about the tattoo convention that's there. And in that article as well, like they interview Pinky, it's like, tattoos are a fine art now. Pinky Young has been a tattooist for more than half a century. In the beginning, it was all navy, naked girls and anchors, the Chinese artist said. Now I draw freehand. Most of my people, they want something special. So he was being like pin-up poster boy for the, not just for Sailor's Story, for best part of his career.
Yeah, and like it's funny because I'm looking at this article that it's about like Hong Kong nightlife in the 60s.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and it's like, note all of the tailors in the Wan Chai photos. Getting Hong Kong suits was a big deal with the GIs then.
Yeah.
I met lots of guys down there spending big money on getting all sorts of custom tailored suits and other clothes. Stereo equipment was also big boys. Was also big guys would buy their stuff there here and have it shipped home. And it's like all of these like cards and everything. And Pinky just fits in perfectly to all of this.
Yeah,
like there's business cards for dancing bars, so restaurants, nightclubs, strip clubs, and there's one of Pinky's business card right here.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, like
also a personal interest to me as well. I have a thing for the upside down business cards that like you hold them one way and someone's smiling, the other way it's someone frowning. Pinky, another man who was doing that early on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like some people have posted those on Instagram, right? Mark for a pause here because I need to quickly find. I thought I had it right here, but I haven't.
Yeah.
In the winter of 1972. Yun sent Colin several designs of full back tattoos. These are some of the ones that are republished in that Don Ed Hardy collection. Yun sent Colin several designs of full back tattoos. Collins had intentions of getting one of them on his own back, but died of a heart attack in the summer of 1973. So, like Sailor Jerry could have had a Pinky Yun back piece. How cool is that?
Incredible.
I mean, imagine also getting a back piece. Like, how old would he have been by then? Like, he was in his 80s by then, was he, Sailor Jerry? I can't remember exactly when he was born, but yeah, how crazy is that, right? Like,
okay, so 72. He would have been in his 60s.
60s. Pretty badass getting a back piece in your 60s.
Yeah, hard as nails.
Let's all aspire to be more like Sailor Jerry.
In some ways, more than others.
There's a big so in that book actually from 64 back design. Can you see? Oh, I've got my
it's blurring it out.
There's.
It's fine. You can send me a picture.
I'll
of
send
it.
you a picture of it. Like, yeah, this amazing like Neptune back piece that he designed. Just amazing. So yeah, like, do you think people like, tattooing now has do you think there's a place for him now still? Like, especially when this book's come out, do you think people are going to be rediscovering
100%.
Pinky?
100%. Like, I think most artists right now, particularly like younger artists, it seems like they're doing like a reappraisal of tattoo artists from the 20th century from like all ends of it. Like, you have quite a lot of people who are doing kind of like Sullivan McDonald type stuff, big ornate Victorian pieces. You have people who are doing, like stuff like Bert. You have people doing like Jerry stuff really well, as there, I suppose, always has been. But I can really see a place for, I suppose he already does have a place, whether people know it or not. But I think over the next few years, especially with this new book come out, I think a lot of people are going to be introduced to him as a person and as an artist, and not just the kind of cultural legacy of his designs.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting in what comes across. I mean, I've ordered a copy of this book because I realised, as I said yesterday, that I didn't have it, and I really want to get hold of it. In one of the news reports about it, it does sort of say, like he's also known for, like, at the end of a meal, people would get up to go to the bathroom and they'd come back and find that he'd paid the bill. Compare, by the way, that with this story from Ed's book of letters with Sailor Jerry, where Jerry says to Ed, January 18th, 1972, "Hey, Pinky just sent the Chinese lion dance for my back, and it's a Lulu. All young chicks, 7 of them convulsing around, ringing gongs, cymbals, beating drums, fanning firecrackers, the center one holding a lion head up overhead, and one bent over to form the lion's ass. That plum blossom tree, exquisite on lower right and Kiko on lower left, a real knockout, especially when I rebuild the girls more my style." And then Jerry says, "I can't afford $30 an hour for work. Maybe we can make a trade, sort of. I stick you first, then give you the honourable chance to get even. I'm tempted. This is by far the best thing I ever saw for my back, and not too solid. It would be too much to take. Just one little chick at a time. They'll go together to make one happy new year. It would make Chinese in this Chinatown sit up to know who the real Chinaman is around here. Yeah, Jerry, you're the real Chinaman."
Oh, for fuck's sake.
So Pinky's got the design. It sounds like he wants Ed to tattoo the Pinky design on him, but he doesn't want to pay him. He wants to do a trade because he can't afford $30 an hour.
I think that's a great place to end.
Yeah, well, that tells us a lot about Pinky, I think, about Ed, and about Sailor Jerry, and about this whole moment in time. Yeah.
Incredible.
It is a good design, to be fair. It's in the American Tattoo Master book.
But I want to thank you very much for listening to this episode. If you're not familiar with Pinky stuff, look it up. Look up, his story. If you want to learn more that we haven't already covered, look up his designs.
Buy the Tattoo Master Pinky Young Don Ed Hardy collection from Scorpion Front Publishing. You can get it from various places that sell tattoo books. Gentleman's Tattoo Flash Emporium have it. It's one of those books that is actually still quite affordable at the moment. It's only like £100 in the UK, about $130, $140 in the US. It will, like all these books, once it's sold out, and then it goes for $500 and $600 on a secondary site. So you can still get a hold of this book. For the moment, you should grab it.
And if you enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more episodes like it, you can check us out on Patreon, where you can hear episodes like this early. You can hear all our bonus episodes, including an interview with Don, the one and only Don Ed Hardy that Matt did a few years ago. If you don't have the money to sign up to the Patreon and you want to support the show, leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It helps the show quite a lot. And, have a look out for Matt at the London Tattoo Expo next week. And yeah, if you enjoy the show, share it with a friend.
Yeah,
and
tell everyone.
And I want to give a special thank you to our £10 and above patrons on Patreon. That is Morpheus Ravenna, Chris Block, Kirsten Wright, Kathleen Burkhardt, Joshua Kent, Jordan Best, Jess Goodman, James Schick, and Charlie Lightning. I want to thank each and every one of you. Just a note, since someone asked me on Instagram, and a lot of people don't know about it, if you want to sign up for the Patreon, you can save a bit of money. I think you can save between 10 and 15% if you sign up for a year. So check that out. Matt's book is coming out in paperback soon. We have loads of shit that you can buy very soon. We have sold out of the Beneath the Skin Armin Dietzel t-shirt, but we will have a new, fresh design in about 6 weeks for you to buy.
Cool. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye. Oh, follow us on Instagram as well, Beneath the Skin Pod. I always forget to plug it.